Welcome to the Conscious Kinky Podcast, where we explore sexuality, connection, and power through awareness and intentional choice.
At the Kink Collective, we help people reframe their relationship with sexuality, build deeper connections, and become safe spaces in the world.
Each episode invites reflection, not performance.
And the conversation continues inside Conscious Conversations, our live community space. Welcome to the conversation. Hi there. Welcome to the Conscious Kinky Podcast.
I'm Joshua.
And I'm Kat. This podcast exists because so many people carry shame around their sexuality. Not because they did something wrong, right? But because they learned it wasn't safe to talk about or explore or even feel curious.
At the Kink Collective, our work is simple and intentional. We help people reframe their relationship with sexuality, build deeper and more meaningful connections, and become safe spaces in the world.
So each week, we slow things down. We explore sexuality, kink, and leather, not as identities to perform, but as information, reflections of how we relate to power, intimacy, boundaries, and choice.
Today's episode continues month 3 with a conversation many people avoid, not because it isn't important, but because it feels tender. How shame and silence shape our relationship with sexuality, and what it takes to rebuild self-trust. This episode introduces 8 reflection questions. The first 4 focus on awareness, noticing what shame and silence show up.
The second 4 will invite deeper introspection, how we begin trusting ourselves again, or maybe for the first time ever, after years of hiding, minimizing, or second-guessing. You don't need to answer everything right now. Let this be a listening experience. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Let's begin.
Shame doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it sounds practical, sometimes it sounds like protection. Sometimes it shows up as hesitation, in some cases over-explaining, and in a lot of cases, silence.
Many of us learned early that certain questions were unsafe, certain desires were embarrassing, certain truths were better kept to ourselves, so we adapted. And those adaptations may have kept us safe once, but over time, they can erode our ability to trust ourselves. Awareness begins when we ask, what did silence teach me, and what did it cost?
I'm really excited for this.
So these first 4 questions are about noticing, without fixing or correcting.
So before we jump into the questions, what I want to remind you guys is, as each question comes around, give yourself about a minute or 2, maybe 3 minutes, and flesh out the answer to the best of your ability. Whatever comes to mind, just jump right into it and put it on paper. It doesn't have to make sense. Just get it out of your mind and onto paper. In a couple days, in a few hours maybe, come back and revisit the questions and flesh them out to the best of your ability so that you can be prepared to talk about it on Tuesday during our Conscious Conversations call.
So hint, hint, if you don't have paper and pen in front of you, you can put this on pause and take a second and go get some now.
Yeah. So question 1, when you think about sexuality, where does shame show up first? Is it in your thoughts, your body, your voice?
You know, as we've been going through these questions, I'm really struck by how my answers want to change depending on what part of my life I'm thinking about. I'm 61 years old. I've been sexual and thinking about sexual things for a lot of years in my life now, right? Shame showed up first differently 20 years ago than shame shows up now. And I think that's important for me to say because I can't give an answer that's like, this is the answer that's true for me, for my whole person or my whole life. It's more, I can only speak to, like for instance, I'm menopausal now. Shame starts to show up for me in my body now because I'm not as sexual feeling as I was when I was younger, and I have some shame around that. That wasn't true 40 years ago when the shame was about me being so sexual and feeling like I was too much for people and feeling like if I let people know how I really felt, they would think I was too much, or they think I was being over the top or whatever. So just to say that where I am in my life dictates a lot of how these questions want to end up being answered for me.
So where does it show up first?
So right now it shows up, I think it shows up in my body first. I get a feeling of tightness. When I feel it, I get a feeling of like I almost want to catch my breath when I feel a little bit of shame. And then I think the thinking comes after that.
So it's in your body.
My body would be first. Sorry, that was a lot of words.
No. I agree. I think for myself, I agree with everything you shared about different points of my life, depending on like things I'm open and willing to speak about today are things I wasn't able to 20 years ago. And when I think about the feeling of shame of, well, what wouldn't I want anyone to know, or what am I embarrassed about? I feel it in my chest. And it's like a hesitation. It's like standing at the edge of a waterfall and waiting to jump, but it's like I'm scared and I don't want anyone else to know.
That's what it looked like you were doing. It looked like you were actually acting that out a second ago.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. It's something that I've worked with people in the past about their relationship with their body and sexuality.
Yeah. I think it's important to even be able to identify that we feel shame, right? So what stories do you tell yourself? Question 2, what stories do you tell yourself when shame arises? Are they stories about being too much, not enough, or maybe just wrong?
I think the stories I tell myself, or I've told myself in the past for sure, is that I'm wrong, there's something wrong with me. And this is where internalized homophobia would come in like years ago, is what does it mean about my orientation? And I can't even say homophobia, it's just because the shame wasn't, well, what if? Like, what does it mean about me? It was more about the judgment that would be cast onto me, right? And it's not like I was afraid of being gay. I think I was more afraid of the consequences than what it says about me, more so how society would treat me. Not to say I'm gay right now. No, listen, if you knew me. But it's like, it was a lot of fear because like people, I've been in a lot of conversations where sexuality and sexual orientation came up, and it was like, it's not always been so simple. Growing up in the 80s and the 90s, and then having culture to contend with, and not that my family projected any homophobia or any judgment on being gay, or did religion peek into it, but it was my peer group, society, things that told me it wasn't necessarily safe.
And I think safety is a big issue. Safety is different than the judgment that comes with being too much, not enough, or wrong. Worrying about safety, I think, adds a layer to the whole shame thing because there's a legitimacy to it. In some places, in some cases, it isn't safe.
Yeah. It was like when I was venturing into my gender expression, my relationship with femininity and what does it mean to dress the way I want to dress, the stories that would pop into my mind was, am I safe? Would there be violence?
Yeah.
Stepping out that door. And I think it was the external judgment that prevented me from really diving into who do I want to be.
Yeah. And I think that's legitimate. As I go back over too, some of it for me too is about, I have this thing about not wanting to be mislabeled. And I think we're going to, if I remember correctly, we're going to talk about labels here in the next episode or two. But it was important for me to not be mislabeled. And so on this whole issue of orientation, right? Like I have never really identified with being entirely straight or entirely gay. And what that meant was different depending on who was looking at me from the outside in and what they wanted to ascribe to me. And if someone wanted to say that I was this or that, and there's a lot of pressure out there straight people tell you that you're confused if you think that you might be bisexual or pansexual or something other than gay or straight. Gay people tell you the same thing. There is a lot of external stress around picking the right title or being the right identity. But for me, it was more about, could I get the outsides to match the insides, right? And I went through periods of time where I masqueraded. I had my capes. I had my straight cape that I wore for years, and then I jumped into my gay thing, and it's like none of it. They were costumes that never really quite fit. They never really quite felt like that moniker on the outside matches who I am on the inside. And it took me a long time to get okay with A, not caring what other people thought, B, not caring if other people even understood, because for a long time I wanted to be understood. But that it was okay with me that I understood that I'm attracted to people for people's sake, and that gender is really not as relevant an issue to me in terms of what goes into my desire for people and for interaction and for relationship, and that I'm okay with that. And that who you are as a person matters so much more to me than whether or not, how your genitalia were given to you, assigned at birth, or even how you necessarily identify I don't care how you identify your own gender either. Like none of that stuff matters to me as much as who you are as a person. And I don't care what that makes me. I don't care what that title would be, because people will call it all kind of different things.
Yeah, for myself processing this question, it's like there's sexuality, how I express it, how I embody it. And that isn't the same as sexual orientation, right? Because what I do doesn't matter-ish based on the body of the other person, right? It's like, that's what toys are for. That's what hands are for. I can go into that rabbit hole another time, but it's like, when it comes to sexuality and the things I like, it's taken me many years before I can, one, be confident enough to explore it myself, but then understand the process in which I can connect with people to determine whether the person's safe enough for me to share this information without feeling like I would be judged or rejected for it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's taken me a long time to get okay with myself.
Now, shit, if you saw the stuff I'm into now, woo!
So speaking of which topics around sexuality do you tend to avoid discussing with partners, with friends, maybe with yourself? Anything feel off limits? If so, why?
Well, at this point in my life and in my relationships, introducing new people or the desire for other people is something that's hard for me because of my fear of being told it's too much, or my fear that it would make another person feel less than. And I've spent time trying to get a deeper understanding of why am I the way I am sexually, and what does it mean for me? What does sex mean to me? And energy exchange and time I spend with people and love languages. That's the hardest thing for me to discuss, I think, with partners. Outside of that, I'm an open book. However, it's taken me many years to get comfortable with talking about myself in that capacity.
Yeah. At this point, I feel comfortable talking to almost anyone about almost anything. Where do I have limits? Where do I have things with family? I've had some very difficult conversations with my sister and with my mom about these subjects, and it's led me to the understanding that sometimes there's certain things that are just better not talked about. Like your siblings and your parents don't necessarily need to know about your sexuality or your sex life or even anything sex life adjacent, because it has the potential to impact the relationship in a way that, for me, it turns out I would rather not have had it happen. So I do have some limits around that, and I feel like if there's not a good reason to have a conversation about something, then sometimes I err on the side of not. Sometimes when those kinds of things come up with other people, I'll just listen.
Yeah, I don't even like talking about sex as a as a conversation piece or starter. Like, it's something I avoid. My family, if anyone was curious about my shit, they'd ask me. I'm not the one to go out there talking about it. Like, I don't need to wear my sexuality on my sleeve, because it isn't who I am, it's what I do.
And I think it's important to note that choosing not to talk about it is not the same as having shame, right? A choice to not talk about something doesn't necessarily come from a shameful or a bad place. It isn't to say that talking about it is always better than not, right? Discernment is what we're talking about here. There's times and places for these kinds of conversations, and sometimes there's people with whom to have and to not have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah. So it's like, I think Sir Bob, one of our leather brothers, mentioned, because we were having a conversation of how do I let people know, and he about my lifestyle, and his response was, well, I'll dress up however I want, and if people have questions about it, they'll come and ask me, and when they ask me, that's the permission to have the conversation, and when they're done hearing me, they'll tell me they're good, and then I'll stop talking about it. And that's very similar to how I've operated for a number of years. Is I'm not wearing it on my sleeve. I don't have to be out there putting it in people's faces in order for it to be a part of me. It's still a part of me, and it's still the way I connect and express love and affection and intimacy. It's just not something I choose to talk about as a conversation, because it's not that, I want to say it's not that interesting to talk about. I think the interesting part of it to talk about is, well, how did we establish a relationship to get there?
It's connection. We can talk about the connection without having to talk about the details.
Yeah, exactly. So question number 4, how has silence protected you, and how has it limited you? Protection and limitation often coexist, and both deserve honesty.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. Silence, you never have to apologize for something that you didn't say, right? I've learned over the years in different ways that sometimes silence is a good thing, and it can protect and it can limit, and those things do coexist. If I'm wanting to be honest about something or be able to talk about something, and I'm not, then I need to look at why that is, right? Am I feeling ashamed about something, or do I have a legitimate reason not to talk to whoever the person is in question? But sometimes silence is, discretion is the better form of valor for me in some ways. Sometimes not talking is the right choice.
Silence has protected me, I think, in ways where if I didn't have all the language and I would have shared something, it would have been misunderstood or misinterpreted, and it may not have really meant what I said, what I really meant, right? So I think, like you said, if I don't have it, I just don't say it. It also helps me keep things that are personal and private protected. Not in the sense that someone would have it to wave over my head, but an avenue for judgment. Right? It's not like they're going to be able to blackmail me. Ooh, Joshua, you like to do this stuff. But
and let's be honest too, though. I mean, a lot of these conversations involve other people.
Yeah.
And so there's the discretion involved with, other people have a right to privacy too. Like if I have been involved with someone or something, and then talking about it would mean possibly exposing that person, like they have a right to their privacy too.
Yeah. And then how has it limited me? It's limited me from lived experiences when I don't have the courage to speak up.
Yeah.
It's like, or to share. And then that could be an avenue for resentment because I didn't have the courage to speak up.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a double-edged sword for sure. If you're listening with a partner or others, remember, silence is allowed here. Listening is participation. You don't owe anyone access to your process.
Yeah, you don't have to share notes. You don't have to share answers at this point. If you're listening to this together, it's okay to keep your notes to yourself if you like.
Yeah.
So awareness helps us name shame, right? But self-trust is rebuilt through relationship with our bodies, our signals, our truth. So these next 4 questions explore what does it mean to listen again?
Remember, take a few minutes, answer each question, pause, and then come back in a couple of days. So, question number 5. This is actually where we come back out of our first breakout room. We'll take a peek in. We'll see what people's experiences were like in this first round. And then we'll jump into our next breakout room. Different partners, different questions. Question 5. What signals from your body or intuition do you often ignore? Tension, pulled back, excitement, fatigue. What happens when you dismiss them?
For me, for sure, I overlook or ignore fatigue as a signal from my body, tension as a signal from my body, pull back when I feel it. I can usually pay attention to. And sometimes I think I even miss excitement. And what happens is I miss opportunity. Sometimes I make mistakes, right? If I bypass fatigue, I usually end up making decisions that I shouldn't otherwise make. And sometimes FOMO will push me to push past fatigue. If there's something going on and I'm afraid of missing out. But the truth is I'm tired. And might be better off for me to do something else or to not do anything at all. And I push past that, then sometimes I can compromise myself and then the people around me because I'm not in my best shape to do something. I'm not in my best state. So I've specifically recently tried to pay attention to my body and my intuition around some of these things, give myself that pause to say, my body's feeling a certain kind of way, I'm getting a certain kind of signal. What does that mean I need to do before I involve myself with other people or get involved with answering questions or making decisions?
For myself, it's tension, I think, and fatigue. Those are definitely things that I push through. And I tell myself, maybe it's just me. I'll get over it. I'm not that tired. But intuitively, it's definitely, I think I'm ready for sleep, but we're still moving at 100 miles an hour. And when I dismiss them, I can get grumpy, I can get resentful, I can get angry. Just to name a few, it's like my body keeps the score.
Yeah.
When was the last time you trusted yourself, even if it felt uncomfortable? What did it cost you? And what did it give you?
So I have been trusting myself a little bit more lately. In my situation, opportunities to be sexual usually involve multiple partners at a time. And so there's, other people making decisions to want to engage. And I've gone from that feeling of not wanting to be left out, not wanting to miss out, having to push past, to instead, when an opportunity is presented, checking in with myself first, seeing how I feel first. Am I tired? Is this the right thing for me to do right now? Not because I don't care for the people, not because I'm not interested, not because I don't love them, not because I don't want to, but just because I either there's not enough time and I have commitments the next day, or I've been burning it at both ends and it would I'd be at a disadvantage that way. And so what it costs me is sometimes an opportunity to be with the people that I care about and want to be intimate with. I don't get to do it as often, but what it gives me is the freedom to be in a better place more of the time, showing up as the better part of myself more of the time, because I'm not disadvantaging myself by going without rest when I need it, or pushing myself into something that I'm emotionally not quite stable enough to be doing.
For myself, I think it was a conversation that we had around partners and intention and time. And it was very uncomfortable because of my fear around hurting someone's feelings. And being able to step into that level of discomfort, knowing that I needed to trust myself to say what I meant, and to say what I needed, and to say what needed to be cleared. And it was uncomfortable. On the other side of it was communication and perspective that a lot of us weren't aware of in how we were relating with the circumstance and with each other. And it cost me some anxiety, like I was nervous, but it brought me peace. It brought me the ability to say, good job, you did it. And who knows what it saved? Who knows what it saved?
Agreed.
And the trusting myself was, dude, you're an adult, man, say it. Like, you have a lot to lose if you don't.
You did great. So question 7, what does self-trust around sexuality actually look like for you? Not in theory, but in real moments, real choices, and real conversations.
I think it's about asking for what I want, asking for what I'm curious about, stepping into what I want to do, and saying what I don't want to do. Not that there's a lot of those. But when it comes to pushing on doors or experiences that I've not had a lot of, it's like, if I'm in an environment, which I am, in which I'm accepted and received, which I am, the self-trust means, I think, to have the courage to say it. And believe that that's what I want. That's what I want to experience. That's what I want life to look like. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it looks a little bit more like giving myself the room to figure out what I really want and to figure out what I might want to bring to our interactions. I've had a lot of time where I just go with the flow, right? There's lots of I have lots of creativeness around me in the realm of sexuality, and I have a lot of partners with desires that are happy to express and ask for what they need, and I'm sometimes guilty of just turning myself onto autopilot and going with the flow happily. I'm not sacrificing anything when I do that, except that what I've learned is that partners also want to know what you want and want to be able to please you too. And for me to know outside of what's already on the table, right? Because there's already a lot of stuff on the table. But additionally, I have to take that. It's an awkward quiet inside of myself. I say to myself, what do I want? And then there's a like a drop into a nothingness where I don't have an answer. And that don't have an answer feels very uncomfortable, and it makes me want to just say, I don't know. But what I need to do is sit through it till something comes. And if I can do that, then sometimes things have come. A little bit lately. I had aha, I think I'd like to do this moment that came, and I felt good about it. And I have to stick with that. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Mama. Question 8. What helps you feel safe enough to be seen more fully? Safety doesn't require certainty. It requires presence.
For me, it's about being seen and heard and not being judged. When I say that I have this chasm of silence and I don't necessarily know and it's harder for me to understand, I don't want to be judged for that. Just because the other person has all kinds of suggestions and all kinds of ways and they know lots and lots about themselves, the fact that I don't, I could feel bad about that. I could judge myself just for that. And so that I don't feel safe, and that backs me down. So being seen and heard, and then knowing that I won't be judged, I'll still be loved and supported, is what creates enough safety for me to feel more fully seen.
What helps you feel safe enough to be fully seen more fully? I think it determines the level of connection and validation a person's giving me, that, or affirmation that I feel seen and heard. I feel like they're not judging, that I'm not being disregarded or minimized.
Yeah. I always cringe when I talk to people who have partners that are very judgmental and put them down and make them wrong. I feel really bad because that's not my life, and I'm grateful for that. And I don't think it should be part of anybody's life, honestly.
It's tough because it's like having to invest into the connection is what helps me feel safe enough. When the investment into the connection is there too, that we're both there, we're both being vulnerable, we're both showing things about ourselves, saying things that we may not have shared with other people, or that I've not always expressed to people or had expressed to me.
Yeah.
So let's review the questions for week 3: sexuality, shame, silence, and self-trust. The first set of questions: awareness and orientation. When you think about sexuality, where does shame show up first? What stories do you tell yourself when shame arises? What topics around sexuality do you tend to avoid discussing? And how has silence protected you, and how has it limited you?
The deeper introspective questions, those 4 questions, are: what signals from your body or intuition do you often ignore? When was the last time you trusted yourself, even if it felt uncomfortable? What does self-trust around sexuality look like for you? And then what helps you feel safe enough to be seen more fully? Shame survives in isolation, and self-trust grows in safe relationship. If these questions stirred something, discomfort, relief, grief, curiosity, it's information. It's not a failure.
These same questions will be brought into Conscious Conversations, our live community space where we slow this process down and explore together. Conscious Conversation meets every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern and is open to anyone who's curious, reflective, and willing to explore honestly. No experience required. You don't need to be certain. You just need to be willing to listen to yourself and to others.
So until next time, remember, self-trust isn't confidence, it's relationship. We'll see you in the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Conscious Kinky Podcast. New episodes drop every Friday, and the conversation continues inside Conscious Conversations every Tuesday night.